Chapter 133. 4. Such displays of affection. When Jin came out from the palace, what met his eyes was that very scene. Dawn was just breaking over the horizon at that moment as daybreak came late in winter, but he still woke up as early as before, not expecting to see that. It was not known when that man had already woken up, and judging from the thick layer of snow on his clothes, it would at least have been 4 hours ago. Although who practiced cultivation possessed spirit energy to protect their bodies and were not afraid of the cold, but the weather in Water's Edge was not just ordinarily cold, its temperature many tens of times lower than the winters of most other regions. He was after all a mortal born with a flesh body, so how could he possibly be able to withstand nature's calamity like this? Jin heaved a long sigh and went to fetch an umbrella from inside. He opened it up and then went walking outside. Shielding him from the flurrying snow, Jin then said, "My lord, it's cold out here. You should go inside." This man had always showed scant care for his own body like this all the time. Especially when he was in a bad mood, he would always like to do something highly extreme like this to cool himself down and to clear his mind. However, Jin would very much rather he be like what people outside said he was. A brutal and bloodthirsty murderer who killed without batting an eye. As when he was like that, he would at least be able to vent out everything he held suppressed inside, and not let it pile up inside his heart day after day, where he would then grow to become more depressed and grim. Qin Yili felt his thoughts being dragged back from a faraway distant place and his dark green eyes were half narrowed. His eyelashes that were longer and lusher than a woman's were covered in a layer of frost because they had not moved for a long period of time, and when he blinked, tiny specks of snowy glitter fell from his eyes. He raised his eyes up to gaze far into the horizon, like he was seeing a certain place, or a particular person there. "Winters come so soon." The cold and clear magnetic voice sounded out softly. Jin was taken aback and he then said with a laugh, "My lord, you are in the Water's Edge Kingdom and this is already your 14th year here. Haven't you gotten used to the early winters that come to the Water's Edge?" Under the cover of the mask, his expression could not be seen, but just his voice could be heard. So 14 years have passed. So he had muddled through so many years in what felt to be just a blink of an eye. He had once thought to live through this dull and insipid life just like that till the day he dies, never having once thought that the heavens would actually still care about him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Yi Li's gaze suddenly softened. He then said, Jin, tidy up everything there is to deal with here in this place quickly. I want to return to her side as soon as I can." Jin naturally knew who Qin Yi was talking about. The portrait that had been carefully kept for so many years, one that other people were not allowed to even take a single glance at, the one person whom the man kept right at the tip of his heart. He could still remember just before they left, when the man had held the young lady in his arms, his eyes had quietly turned red at the rims. The man who had always been cold and heartless, one who did not care about anything before his eyes, had seemed to give all his warmth and feelings onto just this one person. It was a look no one had never seen before, a highly moving scene. Chapter 134. 1. It likes the roasted rabbit I make in a blink. The day of the recruitment trials for the 3 great sects was nearing. The moment one stepped out through the doors, they would be able to see clear changes on the streets, where people of the pugilist world from all kinds of sects and clans could be seen. The usually peaceful imperial capital was also bustling with activity. Business at the tea house in front of the gathered cloud loft had always been dismal, but as the weather turned cold, it was now bursting with customers every day in the recent period, as all the pugilist warriors who had been on the roads and come in from long journeys needed a place to rest their feet and enjoy a hot cup of tea to warm their bodies and to catch up on the recent major events that happened in the world. In one of the rooms, several people were seated around a table and one of them said in a mysterious tone, "Did you guys hear? Something big happened in the Faint Mist sect." "What big thing happened?" the others asked curiously. The man gazed around him and then said in a whisper, "I have a cousin who was a disciple of the Faint Mist sect before. The several other people then went tisk in chorus as they rolled their eyes in contempt. You call that something big? What's so astounding about that? At least let me finish first. My cousin was one of the inner circle disciples among the top 100 holding the 50th rank. The man continued to say in exasperation. But do you all know? He was considered to be rather respected in the sect and had not returned for 3 whole years already. But just a few days ago, he suddenly came back and he said. What did he say? Tell us quick. Just as he got to the most important part, the man suddenly stopped. He was really asking for a beating, keeping them all on tenterhooks. The man turned his eyes to gaze at everyone and then said, he said that he has been thrown out by the sect. Hearing that, the several people there were greatly shocked. For a person to be ranked among the top 50 should rightfully possess significant powers. So why would they be driven out? Could the Faint Mist sect have something big up their sleeves? And I heard from my cousin that the total number of disciples in the Faint Mist sect added up together now, including the ones who have not returned from their journeys, comes up to less than 300 people. The several people became even more shocked. Why have their numbers decreased by so much in such a short period of time? I remember that the Faint Mist sect has the greatest numbers among the 3 great sects and they should at least have 600 or 700 people. They've decreased their numbers by more than half in one single stroke. What could the Faint Mist sect have up their sleeves? I heard that most of them who were driven out were disciples who did not meet the mark and the top 5 ranking experts had returned to the Faint Mist sect to hold the fort. I think that the admission trials for this year's recruitment will definitely be very hard. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Even your cousin who was in the top 50 ranks is deemed inadequate, much less any of us here. I think we'll not be able to even make it past the first round. A man said mournfully. Isn't that so true? Who doesn't know how ridiculously powerful the Faint Mist sect's top 5 are? I heard that they want to recruit 50 people this time round, but I think they would be lucky to even get 20. If the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials are going to be so difficult, I think we had better go to the Limitless sect or the Carefree Valley instead. We'll stand a better chance. Chapter 134. 2. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. You do not seem to be surprised in the slightest. Bai Yen said with interest as he looked at the young lady before him. Qing Yu held a teacup in her hand as she listened intently to the conversation of the people downstairs, her face highly unimpressed. Having heard Bai Yen, she then turned her gaze onto him and replied. There's nothing surprising about that. Winners stay and losers leave, perfectly normal. Bai Yen raised an eyebrow and then leaned in a little closer. Are you really going to the Faint Mist sect? Do you have a particular motive? He would obviously not think that the lass was going there purely out of boredom and was just seeking fun. Moreover, with the powers she possessed, she would not be able to learn anything in there. That just left one reason. There was something in there that she was interested in. Qing Yu looked at the handsome-looking face leaning in that was filled with curiosity. She just curved up the corner of lips and said indifferently to that face filled with anticipation. Heaven's secrets must not be revealed. Bai Yen gave her a pleading look. We're already on such familiar terms, what reason is there to hide? How disappointing. Especially after he got to know from Lu Junyao that she was Aunt Lan's child, their relationship had been drawn closer together and the lass attitude towards them had improved tremendously, but just this trait of liking to keep people in suspense that wasn't all that adorable. I heard that the Faint Mist sect is very strict. Once you go in there, I don't know how many years it will be before we'll be able to meet again. Bai Yen said sadly, and there was even a tinge of reluctance in his voice. Hearing that, a corner of Qing Yu's mouth twitched and she looked at him speechlessly. It wasn't as if she would not be able to come out at all, and here he was saying it like they would soon be parted in death. He is really just as dramatic as that little ball of fur she had back home. Qing Yu then pushed the cup in her hand towards him, interrupting his sorrowful and depressing thoughts. Poor T. Are you ordering me around like a waiter now? Bai Yen said with a laugh despite himself. Really don't know from who she had picked up this personality trait from, like she was born with a silver spoon waiting to be served. Really cast from the exact same mold as that fellow Lu Junyao. But having come to know her identity, Bai Yen was a little more willing to indulge her, the way a senior would care for a junior. Tisk, little lass, don't you know well enough to wear a little more when the weather turns cold? Your hands are like ice cubes. Bai Yen had accidentally brushed her fingers when he took the cup from her, and he was surprised by the biting chill he had felt. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He immediately raised an eyebrow and started to admonish sternly. You might still be a young little lady, but do not just care about looking good all the time. You are dressed so thinly, and if you come to spoil your body's constitution from the cold, you will surely regret it in the future. Qin Yu was at a loss for words. He's acting so much like a benevolent father showing concern for his daughter. With that thought in mind, she just blurted out, Bai Yen, you will surely make a great father in future. Har. Great father? Bai Yen was befuddled, his mind suddenly blank, unable to react to her words. Chapter 134. 3. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. Qin Yu pressed her lips together and smiled. She was just about to say something when someone came up from behind and stuffed something round into her arms. It was warm to the touch but not scalding, its temperature just right. Her eyes blinked in surprise as she raised her head to look up. What met her eyes was a perfectly chiseled jaw, its skin clear and flawless. Seeing her raise her head, his lips curved up slightly to reveal a faint smile. Knowing that she's cold, if you have time to be gabbing so much nonsense, didn't you think to grab a warmer instead? Lu Junyao said without any expression on his face as he sat down on the other side of the table. Bai Yen just stared at him, unable to speak. Did he just imagine seeing that man smile faintly and acting so gentle? Why has his face immediately turned so cold and heartless the very next instant? Although the weather is getting colder, winter isn't here yet. Who would use a warmer now? Bai Yen sputtered to say, his face crying tearlessly. The man just looked at him expressionlessly, the mesmerizing violet eyes tinged with a glint of displeasure, which quickly shut him up in terror. All right, you're the great lord, so anything you say has to be right. Next time I'll definitely keep a sharp lookout for that, all right? Sheesh. You were already so protective in the past, and now you've gone from bad to worse that you're shielding her so unreasonably. Qin Yu lowered her eyes to look at the small and intricate little warmer in her arms, not knowing what was inside. But there was a faint fragrance, a highly comforting scent. The corners of her mouth unconsciously lifted and she said a soft word of thanks to him. The faint mist sex recruitment trials is 3 days away. Lu Junyao asked. Qin Yu nodded. Yes. As the journey there is rather long, I will be setting off tomorrow. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao acknowledged with a nod and then turned to Bai Yen to say, transform the lightning blaze unicorn back tomorrow. Hearing that, Bai Yen was startled a moment, and it was a good while before he was able to react. From the moment they came back from Hades Canyon, the unfortunate beast was shrunk back into its original basic form by Lu Junyao. From its magnificent and valiant massive size, it was shrunk to become as big as a kitten, its looks ambiguous and of undeterminable species, a laughable sight. It had lived among the common cats and dogs for the past few months, but as it was too ugly looking, it was ostracized by all the other animals, with none of them willing to play with it, greatly despising its repulsive looks. This caused the great and resplendent 12th level high-grade spirit beast to be greatly humiliated, but was helpless as its spirit powers were sealed up when it was shrunk. It was damningly unable to overpower even a useless stray, living a pitiful beastly life. To think that the pathetic beast that had been dumped in some unknown corner waiting for mushrooms to grow had actually not been entirely forgotten by its owner. Chapter 134. 4. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. Bai Ji Yan felt that the fellow was really unlucky and his face was sympathetic as he shook his head sadly. Transform it back and then. Lu Junyao's gaze did not waver and his tone was calm as he said, let the lightning blaze unicorn pull the horse carriage and send little fox to the faint mist sect tomorrow. Bai Ji Yan had not yet swallowed his mouthful of tea and he immediately choked when he heard that, coughing till his handsome-looking face was red. It was a good while later before he was able to recover and say, why do you want to make the lightning blaze unicorn pull the carriage? That fella is so haughty it will never be willing to. Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow slightly and his alluring pair of violet eyes glinted beautifully with a light. You just go tell it their death is not the most terrifying thing in this world. It will be more terrifying when a level 12 high-grade spirit beast comes to finds itself being eaten up by a lowly stray cat. Bai Ji Yan could only silently light a candle in his heart for a particular beast for its beastly pitiful life. This is one truly venomous man. But at the same time he came to really see just how much Lu Junyao valued Qin Yu. The lightning blaze unicorn had merely accidentally injured her back then and it was made to suffer such a cruel punishment. The man must really respect this elder of his a lot, and that is why he is so concerned for her child. But he would probably also do the same as well. Who asked the last to possess such extraordinary skills in both medicine and martial arts? Even the little tantrums she threw occasionally was so adorable. She was just so marvelous. And just looking at that exquisitely beautiful face, who could really get angry at her? Looking at Bai Ji Yan's face that was at such a loss, Qin Yu then opened her mouth to say, no need to trouble yourself. I'll just take the regular horse carriage. The lightning blaze unicorn is a high-grade spirit beast and has its own mind and consciousness. Such types of beasts are hard to tame as they have extremely proud hearts. Doing this to it will be just too humiliating. Lu Junyao laughed softly. You do not need to worry, it will feel humiliated. If it was anyone else, that creature will surely throw a fit. But if it's you, it will be most happy to do it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Yu was taken aback by surprise. Why? That time back in Hades Valley, when it lost control of itself and went out on a mindless massacre, it still did not strike you directly. Even when you fell off the cliff at the end, it had even wanted to leap down to go save you. Lu Junyao himself found it rather incredulous when he spoke about that and he shook his head with a smile. Although I do not know the real reason, but it really likes you. Hence even when he punished the spirit beast severely when they came back, and the beast had felt angry and highly aggrieved, it still knew that it had done something wrong, so it merely endured it all silently. Qin Yu was silent as she heard him finish. She thought about it very seriously for a while and then lifted her eyes to say. Maybe. It just likes the roast rabbits I make. Lu Junyao was speechless. Chapter 135. 1. Narcissism. Needs to be treated the next day, outside the Duke of Eternal Peace Manor, the two royal concubines were holding their daughters' hands, reluctantly bidding them goodbye. They even secretly stuffed quite a significant amount of money from their own secret stashes, afraid that they would be bullied by others in the faint mist sect where there was no one to look after them. On the other side, Yen Su merely reminded the twins, Qin Yu and Qin Bei, to give it their all, and to help each other out together with Yen Ning Luo after they get in, for them to become closer to each other. He told them that Yen Ning Luo had been inside for quite a number of years already anyway and would have established relations, so she would be able to take care of them a little as well. Qin Yu merely smiled without saying a word, while Qin Bei went on to acknowledge, to make it a little less awkward for Yen Su. Because there were 4 of them all together, Yen Su had specially arranged for the widest and most comfortable horse carriage in the manor for them, to bring to the faint mist sect. But just as he was about to get someone to drive the carriage out, she suddenly heard the sound going, clippity-clop, coming in from a distance away. Everyone could not help themselves but crane their necks out to look. What they saw immediately caused their eyes to bulge. They saw a horse carriage being slowly driven round a bend, the body of the entire black carriage car incredibly sleek, simple and luxurious. Tassels embroidered with threads of gold trimmed the sides of the roof, which was a really nice touch. But what was most surprising was that the horse right at the front looked really special. Although its body was no different from any other horse, but they just could not help but feel that something seemed a little off. The horse carriage came to a stop slowly in front of them. The driver was a handsome and rather good-natured looking man. Qin Yu then came to recall that it was the man who had been standing at the doors and was sleeping with his eyes wide open when she went to the gathered cloud loft on one occasion. Seeing that, Yen Su took a couple of steps forward and opened his mouth to ask, "And this gentleman is?" The man smiled, but his gaze was looking at the young lady behind Yen Su. "By the orders of my lord, I came here to escort Miss Qin Yu to the Faint Mist sect." The moment those words came out, several pairs of eyes immediately turned to fix upon Qin Yu, to looking at her measuringly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU standing at the side, Qin Yu lifted an eyebrow and her eyes were fixed upon the strange-looking full jet black horse with a bright sleek coat. It was trampling its hooves impatiently in spot, snorting loudly through its nostrils, like it had nowhere to vent its frustrations and was feeling highly aggrieved. That guy Lu Junyao really has turned it into a horse to pull the carriage. I wonder who might be your lord. Yen Su was still a little worried. Although he did not know what kind of an acquaintance Qin Yu might have come to make outside, but just by looking at the man driving the carriage and the subtly muted luxury of the highly expensive carriage that seemed to be more than what it looked like on the surface, he knew that the person must possess an extraordinary background. Though the last did indeed possess some great capabilities, but she was after all still very young, and would fall for the deceit of people with impure intentions. The coachman was just able to say something when Qin Yu interrupted by voicing out, "It's a friend of mine and father does not have to worry about it. This friend of mine is someone trustworthy and moreover." Chapter 135. 2. Narcissism. Needs to be treated. Her gaze fixed upon the strange horse, she contemplated for a while on the approach to take before she slowly opened her mouth to say, "The steed is actually a spirit beast and its legs takes it over long distances very quickly, several times the speed of ordinary horses. It is also vert steady and I think my two elder sisters will not be able to tolerate a bumpy ride filled with too many jolts, so let us just take this carriage instead." The moment they heard that the carriage would not jolt, Yen Shiwu was already subconsciously nodding her head in agreement. "That's right, father. We'll just take this carriage. Since it's a friend Qin Yu's, our dear little sister, everything will be fine." Beside her, Yen Shiro also quipped softly in agreement. Hearing that, what else could he possibly say? He could only look at Qin Yu thoughtfully as he weighed the situation and then reminded them of a few things before he let them leave. The few of them climbed up into the carriage but Qin Yu did not move, standing right in front of the horse carriage as she looked at the unfortunate beast looking extremely grumpy. She then reached her hand out suddenly and stroked the beast's head as she said in a gentle voice, "This must be so hard on you." The eyes of the man driving the coach almost popped out of his head as he stared. "This little young miss is such a bold one. She dares to go touch a lightning blaze unicorn." It must be known that the horn on its head was the strongest weapon throughout the beast's body, so their heads must never ever be touched. That spot was an absolute taboo for anyone except for its owner, and whoever else touches it would definitely be killed. The man broke out in a bout of cold sweat from fright, and he was already thinking in his mind whether he should go back to fetch help, as he would not be able to control an enraged lightning blaze unicorn like this with his own power alone. Moreover, he had heard that this young miss was highly valued by the lord, so if she should come to meet with any harm, wouldn't his head be made to shift house? But who would have thought? That fellow was unexpectedly calm and did not make a single sound, but just stared with its beastly eyes flared wide and its face in shock at the young lady before it. Qin Yu laughed and stretched her hand out to stroke its head once more. "Although I tried my best to refuse, but your lord's mind was set and he was just too stubborn." So, in order to make it up to you, why not I roast a rabbit for you next time? And I'll throw in a chicken as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Almost the same moment that she had just finished her words, the pair of beastly eyes then blinked happily, and then blinked at her again, before it obediently nudged its head against the young lady's palm, docile and tame. The man driving the coach was nearly blinded by that sight. Goodness, was the person he saw just earlier who accidentally touched the lightning blaze unicorn's body and then died a violent death when the beast drove its horn right through the man's body just in hallucination. After having appeased the lightning blaze unicorn, Qingyu then climbed herself up into the carriage. She had just pulled the curtain aside to step inside when she froze in her spot. Chapter 135. 3. Narcissism. Needs to be treated. She saw that the insides of the carriage had a thick layer of snowy white covering spread over the floor, seeming to be the fur of some kind of spirit beast, so even if one were to fall, it would not hurt. Placed right in the middle, was an ornate little low table, with tea and several dishes of snacks. In a corner at the foot of the table, there was also a small intricate little warmer. Qinyu's eyes glinted sharply and the voice of the man driving the coach suddenly came in. Miss Qinyu, my lord said that you should keep the warmer by your side, and when it isn't warm anymore, you just have to add some fire spirit grass for it to work. There's a small box under the table and you'll find some of that inside. Hearing that, she then saw that there was indeed a small square box under the table. Actually, there was some warmth in the carriage itself and it was not cold at all, but it was just that Qinyu's body was always cold and at such a low temperature. Hence, even if it was warm in there, she did not feel it at all, as she had become so used to it, not feeling cold at all. But, it was after all done with good intentions. Qinyu carried the warmer in her hands and then said softly, "Can I trouble you to convey my thanks to your lord when you go back?" The man outside the carriage said in a bright voice with a smile, "The young miss need not be so courteous. My lord owes you for having saved his life and all these does not require much effort at all. So it's nothing worth mentioning." And Qinyu did not respond any further to that. But Yan Shiwu, who was seated right beside her, shuffled over to her and asked in very softly, "Is this from that man from the gathered cloud loft?" Although she wasn't really sure, but she just had a feeling it was him in her heart. Back at the Hades Valley, she had seen just how attentive that man had been towards Qinyu. Although she had initially been highly jealous, she was now just filled with envy. Qinyu raised an eyebrow, but wasn't surprised that she was able to guess it correctly, but just replied to her with a simple, "Yes." Yan Shiwu's expression showed a triumphant, "Just as I thought," but her heart felt a sense of sourness that came out of nowhere. Her mind was filled with thoughts of the man whose looks were so good-looking that he might be immortal and was too deep and profound to decipher, who viewed the entire world to be beneath him. How could he not even give her a single glance, but was so friendly and amicable to Qinyu, showing her the utmost care and concern? She pursed up her lips and then turned to Qinyu to ask, "Have you come to like that man?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qinyu's gaze sharpened and the expression on her face was baffled. What? Yan Shiwu assumed that she just wasn't ready to admit it. "Even if you have not, that man definitely likes you." Qinyu did not say a word, but just looked at her silently. Yan Shiwu then became even more depressed as her slim fingers caressed her own face. "I am clearly also so beautiful as well, but he did not even glance at me once. And then looking at you here." Yan Shiwu was just about to pick on any shortcomings, but when she saw that absolutely flawless and perfect-looking face, she fell silent, finding herself at a loss for words. After a while, she then said, "Besides just that face, your temperament is not as soft and enchanting as mine, and you know nothing about needlework, music and chess, skills a respectable fair lady must possess. So why had he come to have taken a liking to you?" Chapter 135. 4. Narcissism. Needs to be treated. Qinyu was speechless. Narcissism is an illness. Needs to be treated. The horse carriage drawn by a high-grade spirit beast was just amazing. Not only did they feel the least bit of queasiness, even when they were traveling over bumpy and uneven mountain roads, it felt as if they were on flat ground, the entire journey peaceful and uneventful. The journey to the Faint Mist sect was far and distant, and it required at least a day's time even by fast horses. But although it was clear to see that the lightning blaze unicorn clearly had not traveled at a very fast speed, they had somehow come to reach the foot of the mountain to go into the Faint Mist sect in less than a day. Quite a good amount of people have come to gather at the place in succession, as an appointed disciple from the Faint Mist sect would come to lead the way when the time came, to settle them into an inn at the foot of the mountain for the time being. They would wait till it was time for the trials before they would be allowed inside the sect. Hence, even if these people have arrived an entire day earlier, they would not be able to enter yet. There was a rather large inn at the foot of the mountain, and it had no problems accommodating a few hundred people. The only thing that was not good about it was that the condition of the inn wasn't exactly in good shape, being located in the wilderness. The furniture and beds looked extremely simple and crude, and the food served was bland and tasteless. The young youths who were so used to splendid clothes and luxurious food were naturally unable to put up with such poor and dilapidated conditions, immediately breaking out in complaint. "Tisk, are all you brats here to sightsee in leisure? There is only this one single inn of mine within 100-mile radius of the Faint Mist sect. You can jolly well choose not to stay. Just leave and I will not be seeing you off." From the back of the main hall, a woman about 30 years of age dressed in plain and simple clothes said, her face clean and free from any rouge or powder. She seemed to be a gentle and harmless woman, but just for a pair of sharp and intelligent eyes. She cast her gaze out of the corner of her eyes scathingly as she looked upon the crowd outside the inn, and then curled up a corner of her mouth in a meaning smile before she said, "Don't complain that I did not remind you. There is nothing else here at night but just a good number of hungry wolves and ferocious large cats. You can still make it if you leave now, otherwise when it turns dark, who knows what will happen." She said that with an evil smile on her lips and did not speak another word after that. The next second, all the youths who had been complaining with utter contempt and disdain suddenly all surged themselves forward in a rush, fighting to be ahead of the others as they hollered, "Proprietor! I'll be staying. Give me your best room." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. They were after all mostly still inexperienced young teens who had not seen much of the world, hence they were still fearful of such unknown dangers. Of course there were also those stubborn ones who still did not come in and even said with derisive scorn, making up such tall tales. There are really no lack of black-hearted people who thrive on earning money through such evil means everywhere. Those words were not said in a soft voice and the woman had naturally heard him. She merely laughed it off casually and did not offer a rebuttal to that. Qin Yu watched the scene quietly from the side and then arched up an eyebrow before making her way inside. A slender hand was suddenly placed onto the counter right before the woman, leaving a small green crystal stone the size of a bird's egg. "Give me the quietest room you have for 4 people." Chapter 136. 1. Frankly expressed goodwill. The voice was clear and pronounced, tinged with an innate aloofness and noble. The woman was taken aback a moment and she then raised her eyes up, to see an exquisite and flawlessly beautiful young lady with the edges of her mouth slightly curved up. Her long upswept phoenix-like eyes had a hint of a smile in them, neither too passionate nor cold. In that chilly weather, she was dressed only in thin white clothes, extremely eye-catching among the crowd, especially her highly outstanding looks. The woman then looked at the clear bright-colored crystal on the countertop and her eyes narrowed. If she was not mistaken, that was the crystal core of a level 6 spirit beast at the very least, which would fetch a high price of some tens of millions in the black market, enough to buy several inns that was bigger than this one she had. She thought that maybe the young lady did not know the value of the gem and had ignorantly just taken out such a precious treasure. Although she loved money quite a lot, but she would never want to cheat ignorant young ladies like this. She went on to push the crystal gem back with a stern expression, although feeling a little reluctant, but she held on to her principles. Little missy, this is worth too much and I do not have any crystal gems of sufficient value to give back as change, and neither do I have enough cash on hand. Qin Yu was a little surprised. She had thought that the money-loving proprietress would have accepted it, never expecting that she would take the moral stand, and the smile on her face immediately deepened slightly. The proprietress must accept it. It is affinity that we've come to meet and let's just take it as a token of our newfound friendship. The woman was startled for a moment. The young lady looked like she was a pampered and sheltered young miss from a rich family and she had not thought that the young lady would know how to deal with people so well, and had such a generous hand. She had always liked people like this. With that thought in her mind, the woman then smiled and said, "In that case, I will accept it. I have never been a wishy-washy person. Besides me, there are 4 other waiters in this inn. My name is Xiao Wei and you can call me Sister Wei." Qin Yu nodded with a smile and then called her Sister Wei. Xiao Wei's eyes curved into 2 crescents and her lips turned up into a smile. Although she did not possess an exactly stunning or particularly unforgettable countenance, she was still highly good-looking when she smiled, a look that cheered people's hearts to see. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, Money Leopard, bring this young lady here to our best room and make sure to serve them well. As Xiao Wei's voice fell, a tall thin man came walking over. His long thin face was all smiles as he said eagerly, "Will the young missy please follow me?" Qin Yu nodded slightly. Seeing that, Qin Bei, Yan Shiwu and Yan Shiro beside her immediately turned to follow them upstairs. It was not till the few of them have disappeared from sight that the other people in the inn snapped back to their senses, one of them shouting out in rage, "Innkeeper! I was clearly the first to ask for your best room. Why did you give it to someone else? Don't you know what is first come first served?" The ear-deafening roar was tinged with a slight measure of oppressive spirit power and quite a number of them felt woozy from the reverberating voice. Chapter 136. 2. Frankly expressed Goodwill. The weak and frail-looking woman seated at the back of the hall dug at her ear lazily, her eyes gazing indifferently at the tall and burly youth with a fiery temperament. It was just a casual and indifferent glance and the youth who had been in such a rage suddenly went quiet, his body subconsciously retreating back a step. The woman's eyes are just too terrifying. Xiao Wei smiled without mirth as she curled up the edges of her lips and said, "This woman calls the shots here in this place and this woman can jolly well decide who she wants to let the rooms out to. Didn't you see how courteous that little young lady was? This woman finds her highly pleasing to the eye. As for the rest of you here, this woman is now unhappy with all of you and you can all now either choose to leave or to pay twice the price to stay here. You are free to do as you please. You are just too much. This is supposed to be accommodation the Faint Mist sect has arranged for us and not only are you chasing us out here, you are asking for 2 times the price as payment. Aren't you afraid that the Faint Mist sect will come down hard on you?" Someone shouted loudly in indignance. Xiao Wei blinked her eyes innocently like she had just heard a joke. "Come down hard on me? We'll see who in the Faint Mist sect will dare to." Those taunting words thrown out in challenge immediately rendered all the youths speechless but there was nothing they could do about it. They really wanted to lash out to teach this audacious woman a good lesson but not to mention the fact that the woman's cultivation was too profound to be read. The man standing beside her was tall and muscular looking like an immovable tower. Just by standing there without moving, he was intimidating enough to make all of them not dare to take a single step forward, looking every inch a person not to be trifled with. If they were not careful, they might very well stumble into a steel wall and stand to lose more than there was to gain. They could not afford to stir up trouble here or they can forget about taking part in the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials. There was nothing they could do but to bear the pain of paying twice the amount of money to stay at the inn. Qin Yu watched the entire farce with amusement and then returned back to her room. Although it was said that the conditions in the inn was crude, but it was not really entirely unbearable. The beds were hardwood boards, and Yen Shiwu and Yen Shiro, who were so used to sleeping on soft mattresses and fluffy blankets, could not help but to find it a little hard to get used to. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But fortunately for them, after the experience they had in Hell's Canyon and the recent months of training they underwent, they were able to bear up better under the hardship. They were only going to stay in here for 2 nights and it would be over before they knew it. Qin Yu, regarding the proprietress. After a little bit of packing in the room, Yen Shiro sat by the bed and suddenly asked. She had always been a little more meticulous in thought, and she had naturally noticed that Qin Yu had intentionally befriended that woman. Although she could not say that she understood Qin Yu very well, but she knew that the young lady was warm only on the surface and was cold inside, an aloof person deep in her bones and also haughty and arrogant. Hence, there must be a reason for her actions. Yen Shiwu on the other hand was carefree and happy-go-lucky, so she had not given it any thought at all. The fact that the inn was situated in such a desolate and remote place just made one wonder how the place was able to survive. Moreover, besides the lady innkeeper herself, there were only 4 other waiters, so if they were to encounter any robbers, it could be said that they were completely defenseless, much less mention how they could possibly continue to run a business to earn money here. Chapter 136. 3. Frankly expressed goodwill among those few people, not a single one of them was as simple as they looked. Hearing that, Qin Yu only looked at the others to say, anyway, it is almost nightfall and all of you better keep an eye out at night. Do not sleep too deeply. Her words were a little baffling, but they have all grown used to trusting her and they did not probe any further. They just quietly kept an eye open when they slept, not even removing their outer robes. Night was approaching and the weather in that deep autumn was extremely cold, especially in that inn nestled among the mountains. It was so cold no one was able to sleep soundly, and it did not help even when they hid themselves under the thick cover of their blankets. It only warmed up slightly when they summoned up a bit of their spirit powers, and with the moonlight streaming in from outside the window, they could see that a thin layer of frost had formed. Yen Shiwu did not eat that night as dinner was just a couple of coarse plain buns and several unappetizing dishes. She had lost her appetite just by looking at them and had buried her head under the blanket to go to sleep. But now, she had been awakened by a shiver from the cold and felt her tummy drumming up a symphony of emptiness, feeling so hungry she was no able to sleep at all. She was regretting it now and thought that she should have at least eaten something at least for dinner. But even if she wanted a plain bun now, they would be too hard to even bite into. Qin Yu was not sleeping as she sat cross-legged in bed. Hearing the soft groans and sighs raised in complaint from Yen Shiwu, she opened her eyes and said softly, "What's wrong?" Yen Shiwu had not thought that Qin Yu would suddenly speak and she was jolted by a shock. She then said in a rather embarrassed voice, I'm a little hungry." Qin Yu tossed her a ripe red apple. "Eat this." Yen Shiro caught it reflexively and then asked in a puzzled voice, "Where did you get this?" "The proprietress gave it to me." "If you are hungry, there's more here." Yen Shiwu looked over to her and saw a plate of apples placed on the table. They were all big and red and there was also a plate of snacks beside them. She was rather surprised. The lady boss looks like she loves money as much as life. To think that she is willing to prepare this for all the rooms. It must have cost her quite a tidy sum. Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow. "Only our room has it." Yen Shiwu became even more surprised. "You are well acquainted with the lady boss." Qin Yu shook her head. "Money makes the world go round. She accepted the core crystal of a level 6 spirit beast from me, hence she would naturally take extra good care of us. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yen Shiwu bit into the apple with a crunch and said as she chewed, "You're, chomp chomp, quite clever." Qin Yu smiled and did not give any further response. After hearing Yen Shiwu chomp down a good half of an apple, Yen Shiwu suddenly paused in her actions and called her name. "Qin Yu." Qin Yu then lifted her eyes to look at her. Yen Shiwu took another bite out of the apple and chewed noisily before swallowing as she contemplated how she was going to phrase her words. A good while passed before she then said, "In the past, I might not have been all that friendly to you. You know the kind of character I am, willful and unreasonable, but I am actually not a bad person at heart." Chapter 136. For, frankly expressed goodwill, Qin Yu had not expected her to say such words all of a sudden, and she merely curved the ends of her lips up to respond with a simple, I bullied you and little Bei in the past because Yen Ning Luo was always bullying me and second sis, using her position as the eldest daughter and her status as a princess. Although she did not outright abuse us physically or verbally, but she was always intentionally and unintentionally trying to humiliate and shame us, in order to portray her superiority and noble status. Yen Shiwu then bit viciously into her apple, to vent out the rage she was feeling inside. I was feeling unbalanced, and that was why I went to bully you guys. I know that what I did was wrong, but my character was just like that, at times rather irritating and not exactly smart as in the brain as well. Yen Shiwu paused for a while and her eyes were shining slightly. Although they all say that Yen Ning Luo is the Green Wave's most prodigious lady, I feel that you are so much more talented than her. Moreover, you are also more beautiful than she is, although you are very bad at times as well, making fun of me and scaring me, but you have never really done anything against me. You are so intelligent, and if you had really want to do something to me, I think I would have died more times than I can count. You are not a vicious and scheming woman like Yen Ning Luo, who puts herself up above everyone, so that people would not realize how deeply she schemes against others. I have come to think that you are rather nice at times. At least when I'm hungry, you will give me something to eat. I've decided that I will listen to you from now on, and will not oppose you anymore. After saying that, she went on to lower her head shyly, afraid that Qin Yu would laugh at her. But after a good while has passed, there was still no response. Her brows creased up and she was just about to say something when Qin Yu suddenly said in a soft voice that was tinged with slight mirth, "Aren't you being rather smart now? I had thought that you were completely heartless and did not realize it at all." Yen Shiwu raised her head up in surprise. You do not hold anything against me for all the things I have done to you in the past." Qin Yu then replied with a laugh. "Just like you said. If I really want to settle the scores with you, you would have died an uncountable number of times by now." Yen Shiwu blushed slightly, but she was greatly moved by what Qin Yu had said. She hesitated coyly for a while before she slowly came to ask, "Then, why did you not do anything against me before? Is it because you felt that I really wasn't that mean at heart?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Yu lifted an eyebrow with an indiscernible smile on her face. "Actually, I am someone who bears grudges at times." "Then why?" Her long slanted phoenix-like eyes looked highly amused. "I did not really hold it against you because I felt that competing with someone with an immature mind would make it seem like I am bullying a little child." As she thought, all the good feelings she had felt coming from the young lady were all highly misconceived. Chapter 137. 1. Someone died. She had probably been ravenous with hunger, as Yen Shiwu felt full only after having eaten 2 whole apples and went to sleep satisfied. Things were peaceful and uneventful here on this side, but for all the others staying at the same inn who had come to take part in the recruitment trials, it was not known whether they were hallucinating, but they were feeling that the temperature seemed to become colder and colder as they lay in their beds. At first, they were all sleeping by themselves on their own beds, and then it became 2 or 3 of them squeezing themselves together, the blankets piled thickly together over them, but they were still trembling with cold. It did not help even when they gathered their spirit energies in their bodies, their faces turning pale as they froze. Why do I feel so cold?" A young girl's teeth chattered as she asked the other young girl sticking close just beside her. The girl named was also trembling severely as she lifted her eyes to look out the window. "Has it started to snow?" As she spoke, she crawled out from under the blanket with much difficulty, thinking to open the window to see outside. In the end, she accidentally knocked over the teapot on the table while walking over there, and the little half of the tea inside the pot spilled onto the floor. In that instant, the tea quickly froze at a speed visible to the naked eye, as a frosty mist emanated from it. The two girls immediately stared with their eyes widened, gasping in shock. The girl on the bed suddenly broke into tears, crying softly, sad and afraid. "Boo-hoo-hoo. What kind of a scary place are we in here? We'll surely die here. Boo-hoo. I want to go home. Stop that. Stop crying." Admonished softly, and then waved her hand to light the candle in the room, which brightened up a portion of the room. But the light from the fluttering flame made the room alternate between light and in darkness, the flame extremely weak, like it would go out at any moment. The girl stopped her sobbing weakly, tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the other girl. "Then what should we do now?" Knitted up her brows and was just about to say something when she heard a shrill scream rang out next door. A flurry of footsteps immediately followed that was accompanied by a girl's terrified scream, "Geek! Someone died!" With such a big commotion, everyone was alerted. They had all not been able to sleep because it was too cold, and now that someone has been killed, they all broke out in cold sweat from shock. Yan Shiwu woke up still feeling groggy and saw that Qin Yu and the others have already woken up. She rubbed her eyes and sat up. What happened out there? Why is it so noisy? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Seems like someone died. Yan Shiro sighed inwardly, thinking that this fella here was really taking things so easy. It was thought that she was the only one who could fall asleep. What? Yan Shiwu's eyes widened in surprise. She had originally still been feeling rather sleepy, but she was now fully awake. She immediately flipped off her blanket and climbed out of bed. How could someone die so suddenly? Should we go take a look? We were just about to wake you. Qin Yu said as she looked at her indifferent glance. Chapter 137. 2. Someone died. Seeing that, Yan Shiwu rubbed her nose, slightly embarrassed. The commotion had come from the innermost room on the second floor, and everyone was gathered there at that moment, the place jammed packed with people as sounds of angry argument rang out from inside. How did such a thing happen? He was fine when we spoke earlier and he is now suddenly dead. How would I now? I was feeling cold and was going to brew a hot pot of tea. I had just lit the candle when I saw this fella staring at me from his bed. The blood spilled over the entire bed. Why are you looking at me like this? You couldn't possibly be suspecting that I killed him, do you? There are no grudges between us, so why would I want to kill him? The two of you were arguing earlier just today, and if not for the fact that everyone pulled the two of you back, you guys would have gone at each other's throats. You must be joking. This fella has such a bad temper, and heaven knows how many people he has offended on his way here. Why are you suspecting me now? He even went on to quarrel with the lady boss of this inn in front of everyone, so why don't you say that the lady boss bore a grudge and secretly came to kill him in the middle of the night? Upon hearing the loud argument, everyone then realized that the person who died was the tall and brawny hot-headed youth they had all seen earlier that afternoon. The crowd parted slightly at that moment and the scene inside the room could be seen. The youth's eyes were open in a wide stare, and he had a large hole opened in his abdomen. Bright red blood stained the entire bed and had also spilled onto the floor, a highly grisly sight. Someone within the surrounding crowd whispered softly, "Such a pitiful sight. Just how great was the grievance? Sigh, it's little wonder. The kid always had such a fiery temper and he doesn't hold back on his words at all. Maybe he crossed somebody before and did not know it. Now, retribution caught up with him. But that is just too brutal. The wound on his stomach is really not small at all, and he died with his eyes open. He must have been in great agony when he died. Disaster really does stem from one's mouth. Hearing these people debate, it seemed like everyone has already decided that the culprit was really the youth who was still arguing vehemently. Qing Yu stood at the back of the crowd, her gaze looking at the youth who died with unresolved grievance. Her eyes darkened when she noticed something strange about the wound, where the edges looked highly uneven, seemingly caused by a sharp weapon. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It looked like something had torn his stomach out, biting through his body. You all cannot just make such wild accusations. The eyes of the youth whom everyone thought was the killer had turned red. With so many fingers being pointed right at him, even though he was a little scared, he still stubbornly gritted his teeth, unwilling to lower his head. Lan Yu, what happened? A gentle female voice rang out suddenly. With a white fox fur coat draped over her back, a slim-figured young girl suddenly came walking over. The young girl was very pretty, her tiny face almost the size of a palm enchanting, looking so very weak and frail. Chapter 137. 3. Someone died. The youth looked as if he had just seen his savior and his voice was immediately rather choked up. I did not kill anyone. I believe that you did not kill anyone. Said reassuringly, and her eyes then turned to gaze indifferently upon the overbearing man who had been accusing Lan Yu. What proof do you have that Lan Yu killed the man? He almost got into a fight with Cheng Hui earlier in the day and many people witnessed it. Isn't that enough proof that he did it? The youth said with a scornful snort. If you did not see it with your own eyes, do not slander others as you please. The expression on Yi's face was still a little cold. For such a frail and gentle-looking girl, she actually looked a little commanding when her face turned stern. The youth was infuriated when he heard that and he then said in a demeaning tone. What kind of a relationship do you have with this kid? A little girl like you had better not come stick your nose into men's affairs. You might invite unwanted trouble upon yourself. Lan Yu is my friend, and I know him very well. Although he might be rather rash at times, but he has a kind heart, and would never go kill anyone just because of a few heated words. But this young master here on the other hand, you seem to be highly insistent on forcing Lan Yu to admit to the crime, and is misleading everyone here, trying make everyone think that Lan Yu is the one who killed him. This woman is being just too unreasonable. Why would I want to do that? The man retorted angrily. Curved up the ends of her lips in a smile and said, then, what does it have to do with Lan Yu? Her gaze then swung around measuring up the surrounding crowd. Everyone must not forget that we have to stay her in this inn for 1 day and 1 night. If anyone is to stir up any trouble within this period, the person will be disqualified from taking part in the Faint Mist sex recruitment trials. I will naturally not mind having one less opponent during the trials. After saying that, she turned to the youth whose face was still a little pale and said directly to him, Lan Yu, come with me. We have an empty bed in our room and you can sleep there for the time being. Having come out from home, they couldn't afford to be too strict and unbending. It was common for men and women to stay under the same roof and it was no longer a strange thing to see. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But someone has died here. Are they really going to treat it as if nothing has happened? You fellas hold it right there. The man shouted in a fit. Aren't you going to give everyone an explanation for this incident? Halted in her steps and then slowly turned her eyes around. That glance was completely emotionless. Lan Yu did not kill him, and there is nothing he needs to explain for. Moreover, the person who died is not your parents or sibling, so nobody owes you an explanation as well. Everyone was stumped, unable to find anything to say. Things were really like what she said, and there was nothing they could pick on. The man had seemed like he still wanted to argue about something, but suddenly turned, shot a dim-eyed glance at him. Although one's status or position matters not after we get into the Faint Mist sect, but the Ming family of the Soul Cultivators tribe are not people that all of you here can willfully offend. Chapter 137. 4. Someone died. Once those words came out, everyone was overcome with shock. No wonder such a weak and frail-looking young lady like this could possess such an absorbing air about her, one that made it impossible to people to overlook. So it was because she was a person from the mysterious soul cultivator tribe. Because people from the soul cultivator tribe practices mainly soul techniques, they possessed extremely strong mind powers. It was because of this that their people fell into two extremes. The strong their soul powers were, the weaker their bodies were. But there were exceptions to that. A small number of them did not suffer from frail bodies even though they possessed mighty mind powers. But it was clear to see that this young lady did not look like she was in the best of health, and the pallor on her face was rather sickly pale. Until they have walked a good distance away, the people then started to discuss heatedly. As for the youth who died, no one really cared about the reason he had been killed any longer, as he wasn't really that important a person anyway but had mindlessly gone on to offend others, so his death was no great loss to anyone. A good number of people die in these lands on a daily basis, and incompetent people like this just deserves it. Qin Yu turned to look with interest in the direction the young lady had disappeared in. The soul cultivator tribe. To think that she was able to meet them, and she was really feeling quite curious. It was not known if it was all just psychological, but after returning back to their rooms, it did not feel quite as cold anymore. Hiding back under their blankets, warmth returned to their bodies and it felt rather toasty. That had made the bunch of young people who had not been able to sleep well throughout the night to become grateful that they would not be freezing to death that night. And when they came back to their room, Qin Yu was trailing a step behind the others when she heard voices and came to discover that the young lady earlier was staying in the room right across theirs. The sound of their conversation came drifting out from inside. I really am so thankful you were there. If not for you, I might be branded as a murderer now. This was Lan Yu's voice. No need to thank me. Just remember this lesson well and do not be so hot-headed anymore. Otherwise, if you come to be made use of by others again, I will not help you again. Yi's voice sounded a little helpless. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lan Yu laughed a little foolishly. Who asked you to be so clever that I do not even have to use my brains when I'm with you? But you're really very good. Here you are, a girl younger than I am, but you have such a commanding presence, which must have intimidated all those people back there. People from the soul cultivator tribe must not be bullied by outsiders. You must remember this well. Yi's voice was determined, and she then broke out into a bout of suppressed coughing, and the sounds of frantic heaving breathing could be heard right after, which lasted a good while before it stopped. Are you all right? Are you feeling very uncomfortable? Xian Yun, go fetch the medicine quickly. Cough cough. It's no use. I will be fine after a while. Just as she said, after a few moments, the coughing and the sound of heaving breath stopped. Chapter 138. 1. Worming in closer. Your body is so weak and it is so freezing cold here at night. Your body will not be able to withstand it. That was a girl's worried voice, and it must be Qian Yun whom Lan Yu had just called out to earlier. I'm fine. The two of you should go get some rest. Day will be breaking in just a little while. Said softly, and did not say anything else after that. After Qin Yu listened in to their conversation, the corners of her lips raised up slightly. Just as she was about to go into her room, a tall and slim figure came walking slowly up from downstairs, who then noticed her standing there and smiled at her. Young lady, not sleeping so late at night and came out for a stroll. Hearing that, the curve at the ends of Qin Yu's lips deepened. With such a big commotion earlier when someone died, she seemed to be completely unaware of it. Big sister Wei, someone died just some moments ago. Qin Yu said softly, watching the woman's expression. It's that youth who argued with you earlier in the day. Upon hearing what she said, Xiao Wei lifted an eyebrow very calmly. Oh, I see. I'll someone to clean it up. A person died, an absolutely normal occurrence. Qin Yu leaned against the railing with an indiscernible smile. It is indeed nothing all that strange, but I am rather curious why there was such a large wound on the person's body, like his abdomen had been completely cut open. Could he have been sleepwalking and cut himself up that led to his death? But it was such a large wound, so what kind of a weapon could have caused it? Listening to her words, Qiao Wei looked at her smilingly and said, "Throughout the years in here, strange incidents happens on and off. It's fine once you get used to it. Be good and go get some sleep. No need to worry about it so much." Seeing that she was not going to get anything out of Qiao Wei, Qin Yu gave a shrug of her shoulders and turned around to go into her room. "Sis Wei, the little lass seems to have realized something," the towering man who was never seen away from her said in a deep gruff voice. Qiao Wei gave a light laugh and replied, "The lass is the smartest one among them all. We will not be able to hide it from her for long." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man was silent for a while before he went on to say, "Did we act too soon? With this incident tonight, they would all surely be on their guards now. You are overestimating them. No matter how prepared they are, with this batch, less than half of them will make it till the admission trials." Qiao Wei said with a contemptuous smile, and then raised her eyes to gaze into the cold moonlight shining down outside. Her lips curved up meaningfully and she said to the man, "There is still another day and night." The next day, everyone woke up early. Seeing the sun risen up high in the sky, it brought a sliver of sunny warmth into the still chilly morning. It felt like everything had been a dream, unable to even imagine all that had happened last night, with that unbelievably freezing temperature, and the strange circumstances that a person had died under. Chapter 138. 2. Worming in closer. Breakfast was very simple. A bowl of steaming hot plain porridge, a plain bun the size of one's palm, and also a dish of crunchy vegetables. It was probably due to the torment they experienced yesterday, that not a single person complained, with everyone slurping it all down greedily. Seeing that scene, the ends of Qiao Wei's mouth lifted slightly. These brats have learned to behave. "Lady boss, can we go to the faint mist sect early?" a pretty and demure young woman suddenly asked. Qiao Wei was clicking on the abacus behind the counter and she did not even raise her head up when she replied, "The rules say that the entrance will not open before the appointed time." The young woman pouted her lips, looking a little aggrieved. "But it is really too cold here at night and there isn't any warmer around. What if we freeze to death here?" Qiao Wei curled up her lips in a sneer and glanced at her. "If all of you are not able to withstand this little bit of cold, then there isn't really much meaning in you continuing to live at all. How can you speak like that to me?" The young woman almost burst into tears in anger, suddenly regretting coming here with her companions. Someone beside her pulled the aggrieved young woman aside and shot her a warning glance before saying to her, "Have you forgotten what happened to that guy last night? Wasn't he being disrespectful to the lady boss yesterday and he was found dead that very night?" The young woman's eyes widened in fear and she immediately clamped up. But how could that hushed whisper ever hope to escape Qiao Wei's ears? She could not help but smile quietly to herself. Did they think that she had killed that person with her own hands? What a joke! If she had really struck, would these brats even come to discover anything was amiss? What a bunch of foolish kids. All of you are free to move around nearby today, to get yourself familiar with the terrain here. But remember to not roam too far, or if you come to encounter any danger, I cannot guarantee I will be able to get there in time. So you will have to be responsible for the consequences yourselves." Qiao Wei said that with a smile, and then got up lazily to go get some sleep in the back. What a cold-hearted woman. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lan Yu was taking bites out of the plain bun in his hand as he looked at the young woman seated across from him and said, Should we send a homing pigeon to the young lord asking him to come get us? Otherwise I fear Before he had even finished his words, his intention was already clear to see. This and that exuded a strange and mysterious air was not a place they should remain in any longer. They were worried that they might very well end up dead for no reason in this place before the day for the admission trials came. The young lord of the Soul Cultivators tribe was the most outstanding disciple of the Soul Mastery Department and was a leading entity in the Faint Mist sect. He possessed powerful cultivation, was highly valued, and also Yi's elder brother. He had always doted in this younger sister of his, and if he knew that they were facing such difficulties here, he would definitely lend a hand in assistance. Chapter 138. 3. Worming in closer, Yi still had the fox fur cape wrapped around her and her face was a little pale as she leaned back in the chair to rest. Hearing those words, her eyes filled up with displeasure as she stared at Lan Yu and said in a low voice. My elder brother already has a lot on his plate to deal with every day. How can I make him worry about a small matter like this? It will be time in less than a day more and it'll quickly pass once we grit our teeth and endure it. Having been lectured, Lan Yu did not say anything else but lowered his head to eat silently. Qin Yu then turned her eyes back to the table. But the moment she turned back around, she was immediately met with several other pairs of eyes looking at her thoughtfully. What? Qin Yu raised an eyebrow. A flower bloomed on my face. Qin Bei shook his head and glanced at the few people at the table behind. Why do I feel that you seem to hold quite an interest in them? Qin Yu smiled and then leaned in closer to say softly to him, You remember me telling you that you have strong soul powers? I remember that. Qin Bei nodded his head. But what does that have to do with what she's doing here? Those few fellas are from the main family of the Soul Cultivators tribe. And if my memory serves me correctly, the Soul Cultivators tribe's Ming family bloodline has produced two very rare prodigies with extremely powerful soul powers. One of them is the Soul Cultivators tribe's young Lord Ming Jing, the other one is their most beloved little princess of the Soul Cultivators tribe, Ming Yi. Qin Yu said slowly, as her lips curved up at the corners. And Qin Bei had a smart and quick mind, dazed for just a moment before he quickly came to react. And that young lady there is the Soul Cultivators tribe's little princess. Ming Yi. That's right. Qin Yu said with a disarming smile. She seems to be a little sickly in health and I am contemplating how I should worm my way in closer. Qin Bei was speechless. The way she looked now was exactly like a crafty scheming fox. She was always putting up an aloof front, her demeanor cold and keeping people at arm's length, but whenever she started scheming against someone, this sly and black-bellied look she gave made her look like a completely different person. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Once out of the inn, overlapping mountain ranges stretched to the horizon as far as the eye could see, cloudy mist swirling around them. No one knew which one of those mountains was actually hiding the entrance into the Faint Mist sect. The terrain was complicated and treacherous, the mountain roads winding and countless in number, so one could easily get lost. So everyone kept Xiao Wei's words in mind and did not roam too far away, moving mostly together in groups so that they could at least look out for one another. Very coincidentally, Qin Yu and her group walked together with Ming Yi and her companions when they met each other outside the inn, which led them to walk together. Ming Yi was naturally able to recognize Qin Yu. When they were here on the very first day, this young lady had stood out so strongly. Regardless whether it was in demeanor or looks, the young lady was just too unforgettable. But as Yi was born with a more introverted personality, and used to taking the initiative to go strike up a conversation, she just nodded politely at the young lady, and then went on walking on her own in front. Chapter 138. 4. Worming in closer. Though Yan Shiwu was usually quite dense and insensitive, but she seemed to have noticed something as well this time. She tugged at Qin Yu's sleeve discreetly. Hey, are you secretly tailing that girl? Qin Yu glanced at her sharply. Is that how you use the term tailing? Yan Shiwu was stumped for words and it was a while before she found her voice. Anyway, I just seem to feel that you are purposely following them. You aren't stupid after all. Qin Yu then responded. The seasonal climate in the Green Wave Kingdom was the most gentle. By this time, other places had already started to snow, but it was just a little chilly there, and people were just wearing winter clothing of regular thickness. But in front of them, the thin-figured young lady was wrapped up especially thickly. The fox fur she had clad around her was high-grade clothing that kept out the chill extremely well, and it would seemingly be still too early to use that now in this climate, but even though the young lady had that wrapped around her, her tiny face had turned pale from the cold, with no color in her lips. She clutched her cape tightly around her body, her steps under her feet quick. Kuan Yun in green clothes quickly caught up from behind. Where are you going? We cannot walk too far from here, otherwise what are we going to do if we cannot find our way back? Ming Yi's lips were pressed tightly together and her voice was a little hoarse. Help me find the Crimson Sand Viper. The footsteps of Kuan Yun and Lan Yu immediately stopped in their spots. What are you thinking of doing? I cannot withstand it much longer. The young lady was so pale, her face was completely white and her lips were stained red from her biting down on them. The blood of the Crimson Sand Viper can help alleviate my condition. Have you lost your mind? The Crimson Sand Viper has highly lethal poison. Qian Yun's eyes had become red-rimmed and she suddenly said in a low shout. You cannot do that. I am going to send word to the young lord. We cannot stay another moment here in this hellish place. If anything happens to you here today, then we'll not be able to answer for it even with our very lives. As she spoke, she pulled out something from within her robes and was just about to crush it when Ming Yi suddenly turned around, her eyes tinged with an iciness. You dare to defy my orders. But I said that I'm fine. Do not go worry my elder brother with every little thing. Ming Yi said through tightly clenched teeth, spitting out each word one at a time. Qian Yun closed her eyes and her arms slumped down in defeat. The expression on her face was sorrowful, like it was rather painful for her and she was finding it hard to bear. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Finally, a quick fleeting flash of red zoomed past and Lan Yu very nimbly caught it in his hand clutched around a 7-inch spot below its head as he brought it up before Ming Yi. Although he was well aware of the fact that the Crimson Sand Viper was born with fiery fire poison, but this was the only way to counter the ice that sealed her heart. If not for the fact that they were left with no other choice, how could they possibly be willing to do something so savage as to devour the raw blood of beasts and fowl? But she wanted to live on. She gripped her hands around the snake's body and was just about to sever its main artery and drink its blood when a pebble suddenly struck the back of her hand. Shocked by the hit, she released her grip and the Crimson Sand Viper slithered speedily away in a blink. Ming Yi's eyes darkened and they became chillingly bloodthirsty. Chapter 139. 1. Trials quietly held Qian Yun had actually not been all that willing to see drink the snake's blood, so when she saw the snake slither away, she heaved an inward sigh of relief but then grew rather fearful because she knew that hated people who came to interfere with anything that she wanted to do the most. Although she usually looked rather frail and weak most of the time, but as the next most powerful soul master after the soul cultivator's tribe, she was never someone soft that did others' bidding. On the contrary, her temper wasn't all that good, especially when her illness stuck, she could be said to be brutal and ruthless. The methods that soul masters employed to kill a person was a lot more terrifying than most other martial arts practitioners. Qian Yun could not help but silently pitied the person who had moved to stop Ming Yi. Right in that instant, Ming Yi's sinisterly cold eyes were staring unwaveringly at the person who had suddenly appeared and she said in a chilling voice, You have been tailing me. That person was Qin Yu, dressed in full white, looking especially harmless and innocent. Towards the sinisterly cold haze the young lady was staring at her with, Qin Yu did not seem to be bothered in the least as she laughed softly and said, Not true. I'm merely saving your life. Save my life. Ming Yi's expression was becoming more and more dangerous, like she was right on the verge of exploding into rage. Qin Yu shook her head and sighed aloud, her tone of voice seemingly filled with pity and regret. I just don't want you to bring ruin upon yourself. You're actually an exceptionally outstanding soul master. Don't you know that if you drink this snake's blood here today, you'll not be able to break the addiction that would consume you henceforth and turn into a monster that could not live without more of its blood? That's none of your business. Ming Yi said coldly, like she already knew that the consequences would be such. Qin Yu curved up the ends of her mouth. It is indeed not really my business, but I was thinking, what if that brother of yours who loves his younger sister so fiercely were to find out that the precious little sister he holds so protectively dear in the palm of his hand had been forced out of the soul cultivator's tribe and driven to have no choice but to drink the blood of the crimson sand viper to suppress the ice poison inside her, turned into a person who is neither man nor ghost. I am afraid that he might just lose his mind in a fit of rage and embark on a rampage of unstoppable massacre. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ming Yi's eyes constricted. How do you know? I will of course know all that because I can save you from this fate. Qin Yu said with a disarming smile as she slowly walked in closer to Ming Yi, her full white clothes lending an air seemingly like that of a deity onto her, adding to that exceptionally alluring face of beauty that was impossible to overlook. Qian Yun stood in front of Ming Yi protectively as she stared warily at the young lady coming closer to them a step at a time. Behind her, Ming Yi struggled to lift her hand up to push Qian Yun away before she said, "What is your real motive here?" She was naturally not so naive to think that this young lady was just being kind. Although she did not know the young lady, she could tell with just one glance that the young lady was the same as her, an extremely cold and unfeeling nature that ran deep inside their bones, a person who would not want to save her for no good reason. Chapter 139. 2. Trials quietly held Ming Yi's petite small face had already turned green from the chill, but she was still forcefully bracing herself from collapsing. If this young lady was really able to save her life, then she would be willing to pay any price, no matter what it cost her. She must not die. Yet. Qin Yu's eyes flashed with momentary surprise. This girl has a very strong will, a will that yearned to live so unbelievably strongly. Her pair of X-ray eyes that were meant to save people's life could at that moment clearly see inside the young lady's body that was fully riddled with countless old ailments. That young heart that should be beating energetically was extraordinarily weak, a layer of icy frost encrusted around it. If not for that fiercely strong will that longed to live so much to brace her, she feared that the young lady would have already turned into a frozen icicle by now. Qin Yu had been here in this other world for quite a number of years already, but she had never seen such a strange and peculiar affliction. To be able to live when her heart was encased in ice, it was such an absolute miracle. She grabbed the young lady's thin and frail-looking hand and poured her golden-red elixir fire into the young lady's icy cold body, dispersing the chill inside in an instant. The icy frost around her heart was melting at a visible rate, and it began to beat strongly. Qian Yun and Lan Yu stood there with their eyes wide and their mouths agape. For so many years, it was the first time that they were seeing the always pale and sickly Ming Yi showing a hint of rosiness in her cheeks. How do you feel?" Qian Yun asked excitedly as she held Ming Yi's hand. With that touch, her expression became even more surprised. Your hands. Your hands are warm to the touch." Hearing that, Lan Yu came over and placed his hand on the back of the young lady's hand. He felt a warmth under his fingers. The youth's eyes immediately turned red around the rims. Have you really recovered? You will not have to suffer any more relapses of the illness again, right? Qin Yu stood on the side with her arms folded across her chest and she clicked her tongue before she said, "That is of course not possible. She has been afflicted with ice poison for so many years. How could she possibly recover so quickly?" Ming Yi was in a daze as she stared at her own hands. Under the sun's bright rays, she was able to clearly see her veins under her fair white skin. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Her hands had been covered with a thin layer of icy before, but now, it was completely clear and they were warm and dry. Her elder brother had brought in many elixir cultivators, but all those people were not able to save her. They had even told her that if her condition continued on like this, it was highly possible she would not live past 18 years. After this year, she would just be only 16, just when she was just blossoming into beauty. But all of that to her, was going to be too short-lived and fleeting. So what if she was the Soul Cultivators tribe's female prodigy? If she could choose, she would rather be useless trash who did not possess any gift in cultivation at all, if she could just live. As long as she can always see her elder brother. Chapter 139. 3. Trials quietly held as she had thought, all those people were quack physicians. It was clear to see that she could be cured, right? Ming Yi then stood up from the ground, her eyes clear as autumn waters filled with resolve and traces of a plea. If you are able to cure me of my condition, then I will agree to whatever condition you might ask. She might still be hesitant and undecided before, but now that she was feeling the kind of warmth any normal human should have for the first time in her life and did not fear the winter's chill anymore, it gave her the best proof she could ever get. You don't have to be so serious. We'll be fellow sect disciples in future and it is only natural that we look out for each other. The ends of Qin Yu's lips lifted with a smile. Having said that, she then paused for a moment before she turned to look at the young lady before her. But, there really might be something that will require help from the Soul Cultivators tribe. Ming Yi nodded her head gently. You will just have to say it, and I will get it done for you. Then we've happily come to an agreement here. Qin Yu said with her eyes turned into smiling arcs, almost looking a little sly. Qin Bei and Yan Shiwu stood watching from a far distance, as they were afraid that they might be easily noticed if they had gone forward together as a group, so Qin Yu had gone over by herself. Upon seeing Ming Yi turning misty-eyed and her face looking highly moved and grateful, Yan Shiwu raised her hand to rub her chin, before suddenly poking Qin Bei in his arm. What was that for? Qin Bei asked with his brows creased up. There was a rather complicated expression on Yan Shiwu's face as she asked in a low voice, say, Qin Yu is clearly doing a good deed here by saving someone's life. So why do I seem to feel that she is trying to scheme against someone instead? Tisk. Qin Bei clicked his tongue and then gave an indiscernible smile. There is no need to guess. She is indeed scheming against someone. Although he did not know what Qin Yu's intentions were in getting close to those fellas from the Soul Cultivators tribe. Yan Shiro had not really shown much interest towards the matter, but she suddenly lifted her head to look up. Has she been mistaken? The sky seems to have suddenly darkened quite a bit. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After that, Ming Yi and her group came to walk together with Qin Yu and her companions. The few of them were chatting when it was not known who brought up the topic, and they were soon discussing about the youth who had mysteriously died the night before. I was in great shock at that time. That person definitely did not die at the moment when I discovered him. Because the temperature was really just too cold, the blood that had flowed onto the floor had already froze, so it must have been an hour at least. Moreover, his eyes were wide open and everyone said that was caused by extreme terror, but what I saw in his eyes was unbearable agony instead. When he died, it must have been inconceivably torturous, so I just cannot understand how come nobody noticed anything at that time. When Lan Yu related to them about last night's events, he had looked rather puzzled. People from the Soul Cultivators tribe were able to deduce the sequence of events just before a person's death by reading the expression of the victim's face. But as the other person staying in the same room as him had immediately wrongfully accused Lan Yu to be the killer, rage had filled his head at that time as he fiercely defended himself, only concerned with explaining himself, and had not taken a close look at the victim. Now that he thought about the matter, he just could not help but feel that something wasn't really right. Chapter 139. 4. Trials quietly held. The topic was a little heavy and the atmosphere became rather heavy. Seeing that, Qin Yu raised an eyebrow and laughed softly. Of course no one would notice anything. Moreover, I fear that even the victim himself did not know how he died. When her voice fell, everyone uniformly turned their eyes to look at her curiously. But Qin Yu took a long moment to keep them in suspense before she said in an unhurried tone, although it is said that we are up on a mountain, but the unbelievable steep drop in temperature at night is a little too ridiculous. Haven't any of you ever wondered why that is the case? Why? Qin Yu shook her head a little helplessly before turning to look at Qin Bei. The youth's eyes were calm and he was neither flustered nor nervous, seemingly not curious about what Qin Yu had to say. Because of the unique gift he possessed, anything that he wanted to know about could not be hidden from him. Catching the look his sister gave him, Qin Bei was merely surprised for an instant before he realized that Qin Yu wanted him to explain it, as he would be able to explain it more clearly after all. Hence he opened his mouth and said slowly, actually, from the moment we came to set foot into the inn, the faint mist sect's admission trials had already begun. The moment his words registered, except for Qin Yu who already knew that fact, even the ever-calm and composed Ming Yi had a glint of surprise show in her eyes. What did that really mean? After the great purge the faint mist sect underwent, they came to set this as the first test for the trials after discussion that was carried out with utmost secrecy, so no one knew about it at all. So what we are going through now is actually just a small test for all the several hundred people taking part in the recruitment trials. Qin Bei paused for a moment as he spoke, and then continued on to say, the person who died last night, had actually lost the right to be accepted into the sect when he kicked up such a big fuss about the room allocation and had even wanted to strike at the proprietress. As for the reason why he died, it might be because, while he was on his way here, he had cruelly killed his own companion over a highly insignificant matter, and all of this had not escaped the faint mist sect's eyes. But of course the real reason that ultimately came to lead to his death was because he had been secretly plotting to exact revenge upon the proprietress who had been so disrespectful to him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The proprietress may seem like a weak and defenseless woman, but have you noticed the 4 waiters she has under her command? Maybe you might not have noticed it much, but if I am to tell you their nicknames, I'm sure all of you would have at least heard of them before. Their nicknames are Great Whale Shark, Money Leopard, Arctic Snow Fox, Devil Devouring Eagle. Such well-known names. How could they possibly not heard of them before? It was said since the founding of the Faint Mist sect for the past 100 years, these were the 4 great divine beasts that guarded the sect. But it was clear to see that they were 4 humans, so why were they given names of different beast species, and were known to be divine beasts? Without delving deeper into that reason for now, just by hearing these names that were known far and wide, one would already know exactly how strong they were. How had these peerlessly powerful pugilists of legendary stature suddenly become waiters in an inn? Chapter 140. 1. A thread between life and death. It becomes so cold at night due to the hand of the Arctic snow wolf, and he's the one that killed the youth. It could be seen with just one look that those 4 were highly respectful of the proprietress. So anyone who dared to show her such discourtesy would just be seeking their own death, as those 4 people were not entirely good people themselves. After hearing Qin Bei explain all that, their eyes became incredibly fevered when they came to realize that the youth could actually know so much about these well-hidden secrets. The youth was really quite an extraordinary person. But Ming Yi was looking at him with a look of surprise. I really wonder. How did you come to know about all these matters and even understand them in so much detail? The youth lifted the ends of his lips to smile candidly. I do not know why, but anything that I want to know about, it will just appear in my mind. Qin Yu said that it is because I possess strong soul powers, a gift that I was born with. Ming Yi's eyes brightened and thought that it was rather incredulous. You are born to be a soul cultivator. Except for my brother, I have never seen a person as talented as you. Qin Bei rubbed his nose shyly. That's too kind. Compared to Qin Yu, he was still thousands of miles behind. Although Qin Yu had always said he was very highly skilled, it was still far from enough. Ming Yi smiled lightly and said, "You're just too modest. Once we get into the Faint Mist sect, I will tell my elder brother about you." Unknowingly, though she had just come to know them for a short period of time, Ming Yi had come to like them very much. The highly introverted girl had almost never taken the initiative to become friendly with people and only had Qian Yuna and Lan Yu whom she was close to. This was the first time that she was opening her heart so easily to people she had just come to meet and was treating them with so much sincerity. It was a different kind of feeling with Qian Yun and Lan Yu whom she had grown up together with, as this could be considered the first couple of friends she had come to know. Though it was said that they had come to familiarize themselves with the terrain, but they did not walk all that far out. To a person like Qin Yu who had a photographic memory, she had come out merely to see if she could exchange a few words with Ming Yi, getting to know the area and whatnot was secondary. Moreover, it was not known what else was going to happen that very night. With the weather starting to turn cold, daylight grew shorter and time seemed to fly. Before any of them had really noticed it, the sky had already started to gradually turn dark. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU and in the night, at almost 2 times it was in the day, time felt like it passed laboriously slowly and was more oppressive. But at the same time under the oppressive air, they also felt like they were able to heave a sigh of relief, as after tonight, they would be able to leave this strange inn, to go take part in the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials. The night felt as if some terrifying wild beast lay crouching in wait, as fear blanketed over everything. Within the cold chill air of the silent mountain, the faint light of candles could be seen flickering weakly inside. Chapter 140. 2. A thread between life and death. The darkness of the night deepened, and it was not known from when lazy snowflakes began to fall down through the air outside the windows, covering the high mountains in a layer of silvery white. The bare and desolate mountain only had that single lonely inn sitting within, looking highly obtrusive. The candlelight in the main hall wavered incessantly under the billowing winter's wind, before it finally gave a final flicker, and went out. Sheesh. I can't stand it anymore. It's so cold. Although it is said that the temperature gets lower in the mountains. But this is just too cold. Or rather, should we go ask for a fire or something from the lady boss? Someone in the room suggested and then went shivering as he tottered over towards the door. His hand had just touched the door when he froze there, not moving an inch for a long time. Oi, what are you still dawdling there? Hurry up and go borrow a light or something already. Someone shouted impatiently as he huddled within his blanket, shivering. But the person at the door did not seem to have heard him. Not to mention any form of response, but his did not even move his body a single inch. What are you really up to over there? The person on the bed got angry and climbed off from his bed despite the biting and chilly cold, like he was going to give the person standing at the door like a wooden block a good tongue lashing. Just as he came closer, a chill ran up his entire spine. In that quiet and soundless room, so silent you can even hear a pin drop, which made the soft and faint patter of something dripping sound clear and crisp, which drummed on their hearts, causing the hair on the back of their necks to stand. There were a total of 3 people in that room, and the third person had been so cold he could not be bothered to even speak a word. But upon hearing the sound, he was a little puzzled and unconsciously holding his breath, he asked, "What is that sound?" At that moment, the man who had gone over to the door to go borrow a light was still frozen in place with his hand on the door, but the stance of his body seemed a little too stiff and it seemed like something was wrong, his back facing the other 2 people, where they were not able to see what had happened to him. But when the person who had climbed off his bed in impatience went to push that man's body with a nudge, a series of events happened. It was as if the sluice gates in that man's stiffened body had opened, suddenly spurting out a warm and sticky liquid that splattered all over the other person. Immediately after, that tall body crashed to the floor, laying face down, as a large amount of blood spilled in a widening pool. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He was dead, soundlessly and without any warning. The blood spilled across almost half the room, the thick metallic stench shooting straight up their noses, the air turned heavy and stifling. The two people were so shocked by the entire scene that they even forgot to scream, their eyes staring widely with their faces white as a sheet. With the youth that had died last night, this was already the second person to die under such mysterious circumstances. They still did not know how the first youth had died. But this person had been staying in the same room together with them, and it was in just a few breaths' time that he was killed right under their very noses. Chapter 140. 3. A thread between life and death in this inn. Was there really a murderous devilish demon up to its tricks and going around to kill people without anyone noticing? Fear gripped at their hearts, and they all were in such panic that they wanted to open their doors to go run outside crying for help. But it seemed like the doors had been locked from outside and they were not able to open it no matter how hard they tried. The blizzard outside was blowing stronger and stronger, and the tightly shut window that was suddenly blown open allowed the flurries of snow to fly in, striking them right in their faces, cutting painfully like blades. The temperature in the room immediately plummeted, and the man who died froze up together with his spilt blood into ice, with countless thin and sharp icicles forming all over the walls, covering the entire room, trapping the two of them inside. The space they could still move within was growing tighter and tighter, until finally, those icicles that numbered in thousands pierced right through their bodies, sticking out through their bodies like they had been turned into porcupines. But not a single drop of blood bled from their bodies, because it had been just too cold, and all their blood had freezed up. Even up till the point of death, they had not even cried out at all, because before they could even react, they were already dead. Downstairs, Xiao Wei had a hot cup of tea in her hand. Sipping from it, she then curled up the ends of her lips before she said with a sigh, "All these brats here are still too young. To think that they even dare to come wanting to join the Faint Mist sect so casually. Do they really think that it is so easy to be accepted?" Behind her, the burly man who was tall as a tower hesitated a moment before he said in incomprehension. "For those few fellas. Ah, just a bunch of reprehensible fugitives on the run who have committed all kinds of heinous deeds. Did they really think that they would be able to muddle their way into the Faint Mist sect just by changing their faces? Aren't they being too naive?" Xiao Wei burst out into laughter and seemed to recall something in her mind as her eyes flashed. Let the devil-devouring eagle add a couple of his touches. I would really like to see how many among all these brats are talents with sufficient aptitude. The man paused a moment and then answered with a curt yes. He really didn't know whether all these little fellas would be able to withstand it at all. That night was really very long, like they would not be able to see the sun again tomorrow. The blizzard outside had piled up snow that was several meters deep. Anybody who walked outside would find half their bodies sinking into it. The weather was strange, as it was clearly not yet time for snow to fall, but the blizzard outside seemed determined to bury all life outside. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Something's not right. Ming Yi stood by the window, the thick fox fur wrapped around her. Qin Yu had suppressed the ice poison in her earlier that day and she was feeling a whole lot better. Even though the weather was bitterly cold now, she did not feel all that tormented anymore. What is it? Xian Yun heard her words and she came over to ask. Ming Yi's brows were knitted up. Look over there at that mountain. The direction the window in this room faced was great, and they could see a far distance standing here. Chapter 140. 4. A thread between life and death, and Ming Yi had just seen, with the inn as the central point, that it was snowing heavily 100 miles around it, covering everything in a white snowy blanket. But gazing further away at the faraway mountain, it was calm and tranquil, without the slightest sign of a snow at all. The peak was bare and barren, a lonesome sight, where only a forest of empty trees shed of all their leaves could be seen. Qian Yun stared with his eyes widened in shock. That is. Looks like Qin Bei was right. This is definitely the work of the Arctic snow wolf. Ming Yi then went on to say. If this snow continues on like this, the yin might really get buried under all this snow. What are they trying to do here? Lan Yu clenched his fists and said angrily. Is the faint mist sect testing us or are they out to get us? Ming Yi's eyes dimmed and a sharp pain suddenly shot into her mind, her vision bursting into a flash of blood red. We all might not be able to make it through tonight. What did you see? Qian Yun asked a little worriedly. People of the Soul Cultivators tribe possess a certain ability. They were able to see things that others could not, and were also able to see things that were able to happen. But before she could even reply, a man's low raspy voice sounded, that was tinged with bits of spellbinding enchantment. I see that there are still some good sprouts from the Soul Cultivators tribe. What a pity. Lan Yu's body tensed up warily as he shouted coldly, who is that? Show yourself. That person's voice had sounded like it had spoke just beside his ear. But since when had there been another person's presence inside their room? And they had not noticed a thing. It was probably due to the fact that people from the Soul Cultivators tribe had a naturally strong sense in foreseeing danger, and hence Ming Yi and her companions had not rested at all that night, fearing that something unexpected was going to happen. And just as they predicted, what must come, had now come. The candlelight in the room was wavering and the man hidden in the shadows stirred up a gust of cold wind from under his voluminous cape, which almost blew the weak flickering candle out completely. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was a man of incredibly towering height, completely wrapped up in a wide cape that covered him entirely. He wore a wide-brimmed bamboo hat on his head and only his strong and hard chin could be seen. It was probably because it was not exposed to the sun much, as the skin on that chin was pale and white. Who are you? Sweat had spilled into the palms of Ming Yi's tightly clenched fists, but her face still maintained a composed facade as she asked in a calm tone. The man laughed lightly. Although his face could not be seen, but his voice was highly pleasing to the ears. You do not have to worry about that, as tonight. All of you might not be able to survive through this snowstorm, unable to escape the beautiful dreams that I have carefully weaved up for everyone here. Ming Yi's eyes widened. What does he mean by those words? But very soon, she would know. Chapter 141. 1. A memory one doesn't want to recall. Whatever was happening on this side was not yet known to Qin Yu, but just quiet peace. It was probably because there was some trick in that inn, as no matter how big the commotion outside was, the occupants inside the room did not hear anything. Even the highly carefree Yan Shiwu had sensed that there was something strange about tonight's snowstorm and had not slept for once, but remained carefully wary. She looked at the several other quiet people in the room and hesitated a moment before slowly shuffling over closer to Yan Shiro to ask softly, "What hour is it now?" Yan Shiroa, who had her eyes closed in rest, then opened them to gaze at the pitch-dark sky outside, her brows slightly furrowed. "I do not know as well. It's just too strange tonight, and it feels as if a long time has passed, so it should already be the yin hour when night is deepest, but it looks like it's now only the Z hour at midnight." Yan Shiwu felt an involuntary chill run up her back. Is the sky never going to turn bright again on this night? It will be the day for the admission trials tomorrow, and if we are held back by this, then all the hard work we have put in for so long will have been for nothing. Hearing Yan Shiwu complaining in frustration incessantly, Qin Yu rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming. She got up from her bed and walked over to the window before she said, "Even if dawn breaks, we might still not be able to leave this place." Upon hearing her words, the others turned their gazes outside at the same time. They saw the snow flurries falling heavily, and the snow piled up outside had already reached half a grown man's height, and half of the inn's doors had become blocked. Yan Shiwu's face turned pale. It's over, it's all over. We are going to be trapped in here and this snowstorm will never stop. There are so many people here in this inn and we'll run out of food and water in just a few days. We'll all then die here. Seeing her look as if the sky was falling, Qing Bei stared at her in contempt, before he said in an icy cold voice, "If you continue prattling on with such defeatist words, I'll just throw you out the window right now for you to perish on your own." Ever since the time that the youth had heartlessly left her to fend for herself whether she lived or died back at Hades Canyon, Yan Shiwu had become highly terrified of him. Hearing him say those words, she became so frightened that she immediately shrank her head into her shoulders and clamped her mouth shut in silence. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A dark glint flashed in Qing Yu's eyes, a brief fleeting moment. Suddenly, the world swirled before her eyes and the scene she saw changed completely. Qing Bei, Yan Shirui and Yan Shiwu had all disappeared. And before her, it all felt so familiar and strange at the same time, like this had happened in her past life. It was a man with a tall slim figure, his facial features gently pleasing, with eyes smiling so gently that one would be able to drown in them. Qing, are you being mischievous again? Why are you hiding here and not eating your food? Chapter 141. 2. A memory one doesn't want to recall. Throughout the large and vast family, among so many young men and women in there, only this one man called her by this name, Qing, a name so intimate like he was calling out to a lover who shared his bed. Qing Yu's body was trembling uncontrollably. So, even after so long, she still has not gotten over it completely. Once she heard him calling out to her like that, it immediately elicited all kinds of memories of the past, about how well he had treated her, so well that it made up for the pain she had felt for the loss of her parents, so well that she had given her whole heart to him so willingly without holding back in the slightest. But why was it that her most sincere and true heart was not enough to compete with the seductive allure of consumer power and high authority? Even the person she had thought would never ever change had turned unscrupulous because of that position. Qing Yu tried her very best to shut her eyes, the skin over her slender fingers suddenly turned very pale. The soft sound of a person's breathing sounded right beside her ear, as a man's wide chest held her close in a tight embrace, his voice low and gentle. Qing, you are always trying so hard to be brave, so I just can't help being worried about you. Big Brother will always be protecting you. Qing Yu did not say a word and did not open her eyes, her long lashes quivering hard, as he emotions surged till she was on the very verge of collapsing. The smile on the man's lips grew deeper. Qing, wait till I ascend to the seat of family head and will you then be my bride? Let the two of us stand right at this highest position to gaze upon the most beautiful view and enjoy the supreme power and authority at the peak of the entire world, where everyone shall bow before us, the world finally at our feet. A girl need not be so strong, girls who are adorably weak are much more lovable. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man's almost spellbinding lips came closer to her ear, the low and magnetic voice profound and seductive. Big Brother will dote on you very much. The true power of the sacred burial arts and the heavenly insights of medicine can only be brought out through my hands. Will you let Big Brother extract them out from you? The Qing family's two secret treasures, and only the heir was able to possess them. If one sought to extract them, then it could only be done by the copulation of yin and yang. But if the treasures were forcibly extracted, then the body's vitality of the owner of the treasures would suffer grave injuries, their very foundation damaged, to become frail and sickly and be endlessly reliant on all kinds of medicine. Qing Yu's tightly shut eyes had turned red at the rims, feeling so vulnerable and depressed like she never did before. Those violent rise of such highly intense emotions had actually caused the heart of a certain man thousands of miles away to wrench up sharply. His eyes immediately flared open from sleep, the devilishly enchanting violet orbs shining extraordinarily bright. He sat himself up, his fair slender fingers stretching open. A light purple crystal ball the size of a baby's palm flashed incessantly, and he called out in a probing voice, "Little fox." Chapter 141. 3. A memory one doesn't want to recall. Getting no response from the other side, Lu Junyao could not help but knitted up his brows. The crystal ball was a magical communication artifact from Cloud Heaven, and there weren't that many of them throughout the entire Cloud Heaven, so it could be seen from here just how rare it was, but he had not even blinked when he gave Qin Yu one. A person just needed to summon up their spirit energy and they would be able to not only speak to the person on the other side, but also to see their faces. He had done that for safety's sake, Lu Junyao had thought. Since he had decided that he would look after Aunt Lan's descendants, then he should give it his all and do the best he could, even though Qin Yu was merely going to take part in the recruitment trials of an insignificant sect within the low-level realm. But, why had he just sensed that the last emotions were in such great turmoil? What could have happened there? Lu Junyao was feeling rather ill at ease, and with a bright glint in his eyes, the inside of the purple crystal ball started to spin and swirl very quickly, and what met his eyes was a scene of snow that was several feet high, and it seemed like the snow was getting heavier and heavier. "It's snowing." Lu Junyao looked outside. Besides the cold wind howling outside, there wasn't even a single speck of snow. Interesting. Just who could be up to their tricks? The inside of the crystal ball then flashed, the scene suddenly changing to show the inside of a room. He saw Qin Yu and her companions. He did not pay the others any attention for the moment but was only looking at the expression on Qin Yu's face, which did not look like things were all right. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her entire body shaking with shivers, and her hands were even slowly rising up to her slender neck, before clutching around it viciously. The tiny face lost all its color right at that moment, turning a frightful greenish-white, like she was able to suffocate. The aura around Lu Junyao grew heavy suddenly, growing oppressive like the way it felt before a violent storm broke. Qin Yu could not lie to herself. Even though she hated this person, hated the man who had turned her into a cold and emotionless person, he had once, throughout her entire youth, given her all the love and concern of what kinship was to her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man's warm breath from his lips brushed past her ear, opening and closing as he spoke, almost touching her dainty little ear. "Qing, be good and stay by my side, will you? No matter whether it's that kid you brought back here or any other man, they will not be able to give you what I can give. In this world, only I am compatible with you. Be good and give yourself to me." Just as the man's lips were right about to touch the young lady's alluring lips, she suddenly curled up the ends of her mouth in a faint smile, a smile of imperceptible meaning. Within the darkness it was as beautiful as the highly precious night-blooming cereus, that appears fleetingly and disappears almost immediately after, but the stir it caused in a person's heart would not dissipate for a long time. "Qing Tian Lin, you know what?" The young lady's voice was clear and light, and in that silent darkness of night, it seemed like she could hear the sound of his beating heart. "What?" The man was taken aback. Chapter 141. 4. A memory one doesn't want to recall, regardless whether it's the real you or this is just you in my dream, you disgust me just the same. A highly callous smile curled up at the edges of Qin Yu's lips and a boundless rage then shone out ruthlessly from the pair of beautiful and alluring phoenix-like eyes. Her voice was chillingly light, that made one shiver involuntarily. "Who gave you permission to pry into my heart so rudely?" Stunned surprise appeared on the man's face, and he froze in shock the very next moment. The young lady's hand that was so cold there wasn't the slightest sliver of warmth then turned into a sharp blade, plunging straight through his heart, and that pair of absolutely emotionless eyes did not even once glance at him, before she burned him up into ashes with a blazing fire. He had never ever thought that things would take such a turn, and he had died without a single trace of him left behind. And the hidden man who was controlling everything suddenly vomited out a great mouthful of blood, his already pale and inhumanly colorless face immediately turning even whiter. His pair of bright jet black eyes were filled with utter astounded shock. Someone was actually able to break out from the dreams he weaved. And Qin Yu, who had awoken from her dreamy state, then felt as if all her strength had left her, as she collapsed onto the floor with her eyes closed. But the pain that was expected to come with the fall did not come, as a warm embrace caught her and picked her up, holding her tightly. The fiery warmth then drove out the cold chill in her body. Qin Yu slowly opened her eyes, her half-lowered eyelids looking lazily languid and enchanting. Especially when the color of her complexion was not looking too great at that moment, seeming a little weak and pale, just like that of an injured little animal that sought comfort cuddled in her owner's arms. "Why have you come?" Qin Yu's voice was a little low and raspy. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao cradled the young lady's slender waist that felt like it would crumble if he gripped her too tightly, as he helped her to the edge of the bed for her to sit down. He opened his mouth to say without showing emotion in his voice, "I just saw a foolish little fox who almost strangled herself to death, so I came over to see what got you so worked up." Those words were put across so lightly with utter indifference, but only he himself knew how fast he had moved, ripping through the dimensional space to come here. Hearing that undisguised sarcasm from him, Qin Yu's mouth split as she laughed softly. "You've got to be kidding. I will never do something as stupid as that." "Is that so?" Lu Junyao's eyes smiled mirthlessly as he looked at the little fox in persistent denial. "Then can you stand up and walk a couple of steps for me to see?" "Heh heh." In such a state of utter exhaustion, it is clear that it was caused by having just over-depleted your mental strength. Really don't know what she saw just now that could affect her so much. Fortunately, she has already broken out of that predicament on her own. Chapter 142. 1. Legitimate self-defense. Hearing the man's mocking tone, Qin Yu glanced at the man expressionlessly, clearly not falling for the taunt, but just continued to lean weakly against his shoulder as she said indifferently, "Don't think just because you caught my fall that I will then be grateful to you." Lu Junyao could not help but laugh and then replied, "It's the least I should do. No need for any gratitude." After taking a little time to gather herself and recover a bit, some color returned to Qin Yu's face. That was when Qin Yu noticed that Qin Bei and the others had also fallen into a dreamy state, and had not yet broken out of it. The expressions on their faces varied. Lu Junyao then said, "You don't have to worry about them. You have already caused the hidden person behind this to suffer a severe backlash, and they would not be in much danger while they are still caught in their dreams, maybe just have their minds ravaged a little at most, which would toughen them up." Hearing that, the air around Qin Yu suddenly fell by quite a few good degrees. No matter whether this was to test them or not, but this was just too much. The memory that had been sealed and laid in dust for so long, after so many years where she had come to be able to gradually put it down. But that person had come to dig up this most painful memory once more. The name Qin Tianlin always caused her emotions to surge up so easily. The young lady's exquisitely beautiful face almost looked like a layer of frost had formed over its smooth skin, colder than the howling snowy blizzard raging outside. Her lips parted, her voice devoid of any emotion, "Lu Junyao, help me find that person." He had seen her smiling with joy and admonish in rage, seen her deviously crafty and sly. But to look like she was out to shake the heavens and tear up the earth like this, it was the first time that Lu Junyao was seeing it. He could not help but recall her face that he had seen earlier in the crystal ball, that had been so frail almost to the point of collapse. Just what could have caused her to be in so much despair? Although he did not know what she saw, but recalling how weakened and frail she had looked, Lu Junyao knew that he did not want to see that a second time. This young lady was born to look so proud like this, and looking pitifully weak should not ever appear on that face. One who dared to order Lu Junyao so matter-of-factly, throughout the entire world, it was feared that it was only just Qin Yu alone. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man seemed rather helpless, but what was seen between his brows could only be doting indulgence. The blizzard continued to howl outside, the bare trees covered in a thick blanket of white as they waved to and fro under the powerful wind, moving strangely under the darkness of the night. Someone hidden in a secret room on the ground floor was telling Xiao Wei something. Suddenly paused, and his eyes turned to gaze towards the door. The other people in the room immediately stopped talking, and the door was then opened in the next instant, letting in a bone-biting icy chill from outside. A tall and well-built figure came staggering in through the door, and then seemed to be trying to brace himself up for a long while before he fell on one knee to the ground, unable to withstand it any longer as he vomited out a mouthful of blood. Xiao Wei and the others stared with their eyes wide, in utter disbelief. Devil-devouring eagle. How did you even get injured? Who could have done it? Chapter 142. 2. Legitimate self-defense. The devil-devouring eagle's body that was shrouded under the wide black cape was already soaked in cold sweat. The agony he was feeling from the backlash that he suffered was causing the meridians in every part of his body to be tightly stretched, almost robbing him of his voice. But even though that was the case, he still managed to eke out the words, quickly. Leave now. Listening carefully, his voice even sounded like it was trembling. Among the four of them, although the devil-devouring eagle's cultivation was the lowest, but it was more than enough to deal with the entire bunch of little runts here. Moreover, he also held an amazing profession, as a dreamweaver. Once it started, within 100-meter radius, not even beasts and animals would be able to escape the dreams he wove, and in those dreams, he was fully dominant. But why had he come back all injured? And was urging them to leave? Could it be that among the bunch of brats, there really was a peerless prodigy that they had missed out on? In that short period of time that they stood there stunned in a daze, they came to lose their best chance of escaping. The shade on the devil-devouring eagle's face turned uglier and he vomited out another mouthful of blood. A soft voice without any emotion then sounded from outside the door. The few of you here have really made me see all of you in a new light. That voice. Xiao Wei subconsciously lifted her eyes. Just behind the devil-devouring eagle, she saw two figures standing there, partially shrouded in the darkness as they came walking out into the light. The slim petite figure in front, was the young lady who had left a very good impression on her. And as for the tall-figured man behind her, Xiao Wei's face looked as if her soul had been sucked out of her and she immediately turned away. That man's eyes were just too terrifying to look at. The young lady's face was also no longer as gentle and polite looking as the time they had first met, the expression rather cold. Xiao Wei kept a smile on her face and said, "Congratulations young lady, you are the first person to pass the test." "Is that so?" Qin Yu's face did not show even a ripple of emotion as her gaze swept over the few people inside the room, her tone of voice highly calm. Her slender fingers then gripped upon the devil-devouring eagle's clothes, easily picking up the man who was a lot taller and bigger than she was up from the ground. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Since I have passed the test, then I will be taking this person here. The smile on Xiao Wei's face congealed. What do you mean? Qin Yu snorted with cold derision. Having dug deep into my heart and trapping me within a dream. Just for that reason alone, there is no reason for him to live any longer. Little young lady, being so haughty with your ways will definitely make you suffer consequences. Xiao Wei said with a soft laugh. This was what the Faint Mist sect leader wanted, so even if you have any grievance against that, you've got the wrong person here. Moreover, no matter how strong you are, the rest of us here are not people you can afford to trifle with easily. Those words were delivered with a tinge of threat in them. Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow and then opened her mouth in response. Of course I know that you guys are not to be trifled with. So don't you see that I brought help with me? I am definitely having all his powers destroyed here today. Chapter 142. 3. Legitimate self-defense help. Xiao Wei then subconsciously looked up at the tall man behind her. He was very tall, and half of his body was still cast in shadows, but his pair of violet eyes shone with a brilliant light within the darkness of night, that made her heart beat fast. The Arctic snow wolf was a thin-figured man with sharp intelligent looks. When he heard those words that felt so much like a taunt, he just could not hold back his impulse at that instant but said to the young lady, "Little lass, you are courting your own death." Immediately upon saying that nimble body moved at a speed faster than the eye could see as he lunged straight towards Qin Yu. "Stop!" Xiao Wei's eyes flared wide, quickly shouting out to stop him, but it was already too late. The Arctic snow wolf's fingers shot viciously towards the young lady's thin slender neck in a malevolent strike, murder rising in his heart. Qin Yu stood unmoving in her spot, neither dodging nor running away, but just looked squarely at the attack that was riddled with openings. The long arm of the man behind her whipped out and pulled her into his arms. Before the Arctic snow wolf had even gotten close, he was thrown back by a powerful and explosive force, which sent his body crashing into the hard pillar all the way at the back of the hidden secret room, and a mouthful of blood immediately spurted out from his mouth as he lay weakly on the ground, not moving an inch, unable to stand up at all. Old Third. Money Leopard's face paled and he quickly went over to his companion, putting his hand on his wrist to check his condition. His face immediately turned an even uglier shade. He looked up mournfully to meet Xiao Wei's worried gaze and said slowly, pausing at every single word, "All of Old Third's meridians have been severed." Xiao Wei felt as if she had fallen into an icy lake, her eyes filled with terror as she stared at the mysterious man whose eyes were lowered as he questioned the young lady in his arms if she was all right. She had seen it clearly just now. That man had definitely not even made any move to strike at all. Just as Arctic Snow Wolf had come to get close to him, the man had merely just glanced expressionlessly at him. Just a single glance and Arctic Snow Wolf had all his cultivation destroyed, turned into a useless shell. How terrifying! Though peerless pugilists with unparalleled power have been born in these constellation lands throughout the years, but never had there been one that could compare to this man's attainment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Just who is this man? Qin Yu, who had been about to make her move, was similarly stunned as she looked at the scene before her. She then looked up with displeasure in her eyes and asked, "What are you doing?" Lu Junyao's face was looking at her matter-of-factly as he replied, "Purely legitimate self-defense." "Someone was lunging straight at me, am I supposed to just stand there to let him strike me? Isn't your self-defense a little too overdone? Moreover, he was clearly coming right at me. That single retaliation from him would surely cause that man to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. She had merely brought him along for grandstanding purposes. Now he has really done it, having completely crippled the man." Chapter 142. For legitimate self-defense. Looking at the young lady who was seemingly rather angry, Lu Junyao's gaze turned sharp and his voice was low as he said, "I told myself that I will take care of you for Aunt Lan, so I will not allow you to even come close to getting hurt at all." His stern and serious demeanor caused Qin Yu to be stumped for words, and she could do nothing but feel a little frustrated inside. She had merely wanted to teach the devil-devouring eagle a lesson, but Lu Junyao had instead completely destroyed the Arctic snow wolf's cultivation, so she felt like she shouldn't find any more trouble with them anymore. Seeing how jittery with trepidation Xiao Wei and her companions were, angry but not daring to voice out, Qin Yu suddenly came to pity them. That fellow Lu Junyao had really been too tyrannical, never giving a thought to how severe and heavy-handed a single strike from him would be. Which was not merely heavy, but the guy was now barely able to breathe. This is a spirit-strengthening elixir. It should be able to help him. Qin Yu said as she handed Xiao Wei a red porcelain bottle. I had originally not meant much harm, but a person would always have some part of their past that they would not be willing to revisit. But since things have turned out like this, I will not pursue it any further. Xiao Wei had taken extra good care of her in the past 2 days, and the room she was staying in with her companions was the best one in the inn, kept much warmer than the other rooms. Hence when the snow fell, the cold the few of them had felt in their room was quite a lot less than the others as well. Although it could be said that Xiao Wei had accepted benefits from the young lady, she had really treated the young lady quite well in here. Xiao Wei was taken aback by her actions a moment before she then accepted the tiny porcelain bottle. She immediately gave it to Money Leopard for him to feed it to Arctic Snow Wolf. Her eyes were rather confused as she went on to ask Qing Yu, with the kind of powers you possess, why have you come to the Faint Mist sect? Although she had not seen the young lady make any moves, the aura emanating from a powerful pugilist could never be completely masked. Moreover, she was acquainted with a friend with such terrifying cultivation, so how could she possibly be anyone ordinary? She could very well just go to the White Fan continent. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing that, Qing Yu curved up the ends of her lips and her eyes grew deep and profound. Going to the Faint Mist sect is naturally not to further my cultivation, but there is a reason that makes it a must for me. One would not be allowed to come out for 2 years after being accepted into the Faint Mist sect. She really didn't have so much time to waste in there as her ultimate aim was Cloud Heaven itself. The place filled with so much mystery. Being so severely injured, the Arctic Snow Wolf was naturally unable to control the weather anymore, and the snow that had fallen for a good half of the night finally stopped, as it all began to thaw. Many of them were not able to break out from the dreams that the devil-devouring eagle had weaved, as it was just entirely human for them to be plagued by greed and past sins. In just one night, among the several hundred people who came to participate in the recruitment trials, only half remained. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.